Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Frank Louie. I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. Welcome to this webinar sponsored by the City of Los Angeles Department of Cannabis Regulation, Business Licensing and Compliance Assistance Program, also known as the BLC. BLC programming is designed to assist social equity applicants in Los Angeles in obtaining a commercial cannabis license and operating a successful cannabis business. This installment of our 2025 webinar series focuses on real estate. Now, before we get started, let's take a moment to review some housekeeping rules. Please note this webinar is being recorded and can be viewed only on DCR's learning management system after the editing process. You will be muted with cameras off for the duration of the webinar. This means that your camera and audio functions will not be available to you during this session. However, you will be able to see and hear all the panelists. There's an open chat box where you can interact with one another for networking or comment on the information. Please use caution when sharing personal information in the public forum and keep your questions focused on today's topic. Please ask questions about today's subject matter in the Q&A box. We are gathering and responding to your questions throughout the presentation, and we'll have a Q&A session where you will be able to get responses in the last portion of today's event. You are encouraged to utilize the Q&A box at the bottom pane of your Zoom screen. If you use the Q&A box, everyone will be able to see the questions and answers as they are responded to. Finally, please note that today's content was not created by the Department of Cannabis Regulation or the City of Los Angeles and is for informational purposes only. This information is subject to change and does not replace or supersede the Los Angeles Municipal Code nor constitute legal advice. If you have any specific questions outside of today's topic, please call 213-978-0738 during business hours, which are Monday through Thursday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., to speak to a DCR representative. And now I'd like to introduce our guest presenter, Courtney Lang. Courtney is a California-based consultant. For over 8 years, Courtney has specialized in cannabis real estate, licensing, and business development. She partners with businesses and leadership to build the foundation for a successful company. In addition to her cannabis background, Courtney offers her clients over 10 years of expertise working in natural food industry for several small to medium-sized companies. She has helped form large teams, develop and execute strategic plans and grassroots marketing campaigns, create company-wide policies and procedures, and manage boards and stakeholder groups. Now I'd like to ask Courtney to join me on screen. Welcome, Courtney, and feel free to start sharing your screen and your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction, Frank, and thanks for everybody who's joining today. We're going to cover acquiring compliant real estate. You should be seeing my slides now, and yeah, hopefully we have some new social equity individual applicants that are joining us. I know we've got a new group that were just registered, so this webinar is perfect for you because this is the starting step, is establishing your entity and acquiring compliant real estate. So for today, our agenda looks like this. We're going to first overview the real estate team and tasks. Next, we'll take a look at DCR's pre-application review process. Third, we'll look at location, compliance, and eligibility. So this will include zoning restrictions, ineligible locations, as well as sensitive use distancing, mapping tools and data that's available to you, the public, for real estate due diligence. And we'll also do a quick review of some tips, some resources, and then we'll jump into Q&A. We are recording this, like Frank said, so this presentation itself will be available to you. And I do see this as a resource, and it's going to walk you through step by step the pre-app process, acquiring real estate. So there's going to be not only the process that we'll walk you through, but there's a lot of resources that we'll want to make sure that you're familiar with, and they're all linked in this webinar presentation. Let's just get started here. So without further ado, we'll take a look at the team and the tasks. So first off, when you're acquiring real estate, you're really acquiring a liability. This liability will be taken on by you, the business owner, as well as anybody else who is a part of the business. So it's important to know what level of liability are you taking on? What's your risk tolerance? to really determine who you need on your team. I've outlined four different team members that you could bring on, but it's not required to have all of them. If you're purchasing a property, definitely you're going to probably have a bigger budget. It's a much more much riskier contract than, let's say, a lease for a small suite. So let's just take a look at some of the team members real quick and talk about how you can make up your team and divvy up some of the roles. So for first and foremost, it's good to know what can you do in terms of the real estate compliance process. I always like to tell clients if it's just you and you're the only business owner of the entity, you can take on a lot more, such as entity formation. You can do that yourself online without hiring an attorney. You might want to have them review the documents at the end of these entity establishment process, but you can certainly go on and establish your entity by filing the forms with the city or filing the forms with the state, as well as the IRS. Also, in terms of finding locations, the information is mostly found on public databases at this point in time for commercial real estate. A real estate agent is definitely going to have their own personal networks that you want to tap into, but you can take on finding locations yourself by looking at the public databases. It's just really up to you as far as what kind of time and resources you want to dedicate to this. You might have some other businesses that you're running or another full-time job. So again, it's really up to you, your resources and your time. The other things that you can do are conducting due diligence. So for each property that you're looking at, you're going to need to check about zoning. You're going to need to check about sensitive uses and other business locations and like what their close proximity is to the potential location that you're looking at. So we'll take a deeper dive into conducting due diligence in this next part, submitting pre-application, because my hope is that after this webinar that you can definitely take on the due diligence part. You can definitely take on the pre-application part. And so moving forward, also a commercial real estate agent. Not everyone uses a commercial real estate agent, but like I said before, finding off-market listings are really key to having a commercial real estate agent. They will also take a lot of the burden off of your back. So finding locations, they can definitely help you out with that. And also negotiating your lease and purchase agreement terms. So as far as the commercial real estate agent goes, like I said, some people don't always use a real estate agent. They might work directly with the property owner, but you're missing out on some of the listings for sure. And they will take some of the tasks off of your back if you want to work with them. As far as a consultant goes, definitely not a requirement to hire a consultant, but they can help out with entity formation. They can help you out with conducting due diligence. And certainly when it comes to submitting the pre-application, which is the process with the city, they can take that off your hands. I will say that myself and some other coaches are available through the business coaching that allows you to sign up for 30-minute sessions. And certainly we can help you with the due diligence process. If you bring properties to those coaching meetings, we can help you perform the due diligence on those coaching sessions. We can also help you walk you through the submitting the pre-application. So use that to your advantage for sure. We'll talk about that a little later. And then an attorney. So when it comes to attorneys, it's really important to have a budget in mind. It's really important to get organized before you bring tasks to your attorney. Otherwise, your budget will be surpassed very fast, right? So what I like to tell my clients is that attorneys are really helpful with entity formation. If you're going to have multiple business partners, things get complicated, right? And so in that case, I would definitely hire an attorney to help you out with the operating agreement and the bylaws, which are the governing documents that basically dictate how much money each person's giving, what percentages they get for that. There's also sweat equity and things like that that are determined, but it's very important to have an attorney if you have multiple business partners. They can help out with due diligence, but you can obviously use the coaching. You can use consultants, which are probably a little cheaper for due diligence. But if you just want to have it all in one house, they definitely can help you out with due diligence. Negotiating the lease and the purchase agreements. So a commercial real estate agent can certainly do that for you, but an attorney is really going to go to bat for you and make sure and go through it with a fine tooth comb. If you're doing a purchase agreement, there's obviously a lot more at stake. A purchase agreement would be to purchase a property, and you might be spending something like $2 million. Obviously, that's a lot of risk, a lot of liability. And so I definitely, again, would require or recommend that you hire an attorney for a job like that. If it's just a lease, $2,500 or $3,000 a month lease, maybe you could just get away with having your real estate agent help you negotiate those terms, right? And again, like I said, you can have it all in one house with an attorney and have them help you out with your pre-application. It's really just about your budget. And whatever you do hire an attorney for, I think it's really helpful to say, hey, my budget is $2,500 for this task, or my budget is $5,000, to help you make sure that you stay on budget with your attorney. I know there are pro bono and low bono services available for you too. And I would say that your operating agreement and your bylaws for your entity, as well as the lease and purchase agreements, those are good things to bring to your attorney. And those low bono, pro bono signups, I think you have, limited 10 hours or something like that. So make sure you're really organized and have your real estate agent and or consultant help you out to get those to the furthest possible place so that you hand it to the attorney and you're really efficient with what you're asking them to do. Okay. So some tasks, this is really where you're going to start. So it is going in sequence of what I would recommend doing first and last, right? So first up would be your entity formation. So you're going to need this to sign a lease, and you're going to need this to sign a purchase agreement. You're going to need this to sign or to start the process with the city where they verify your property to make sure it's compliant. So I really wouldn't recommend starting to look for property until your entity is formed. If it's just you, like I said, it's pretty simple. You can do it online on like LegalZoom or something like that, and get it started really quickly. But if you have a lot of partners involved, this could take months. So know the task at hand here and how complicated it's going to be and how long it'll take you. The entity is important because you need to have the same entity on the lease as you do on your license, right? So you can't wait to start your licensing entity till you're further down in this process. You really want to have this upfront started and ready to go. This also shows property owners that you're serious. If you have your entity formed, as well as this next item, which is proof of funds and credit scores. So typically, they're going to ask that any owner of the business is going to show their credit scores, or provide a credit report. And it's up to them to determine what they're comfortable with in terms of credit scores. But those are going to be asked for, whether you're purchasing or leasing a building. And then as far as proof of fundings, it's not expected that the funds be in a bank account for your entity per se, but you're going to want to be able to show proof of funds under one of the business owners' bank accounts, right? So that's something you might need to work on organizing before you start looking for your properties. Who is going to show proof of funds and how much you probably need. If you're going to be signing a lease, they're typically 5-year leases, and you're going to want to show that you have about 20% of the amount that you'll need to pay in your lease over a 5-year period. So again, showing 20% of the total lease amount that's going to be due over a 5-year period would be what I would recommend having ready. And then if you're going to be purchasing a building, it's typically 20% down at least, but you're going to need to show proof of funds for that as well, just to get a purchase agreement signed and like to begin negotiating on a property. So those two are important tasks to begin before you start looking for properties. So next, we'll have you start looking for compliant locations. As I've mentioned, you've got commercial real estate agents. They have extensive networks, so they'll help you find off-market listings. But you can also use them, the percentage that they get off of you signing a lease or signing a purchase agreement, they have to do some work, right? So you can use them to help sort the public databases. Typically, typically a real estate agent is going to know the zoning information. So is it in the green zone? But there's so much more to compliant real estate, and you don't want to depend on them for that. I'll talk more about that later in the presentation. But a commercial real estate agent will find you things that are in the right zone based on what license you're looking to operate. So you'll want to use them to tap into their networks and use them to really look through the public databases for you so you don't have to. If you don't want to use a real estate agent, again, these are public databases, so they're available to you. The best one to use is LoopNet. There's also 420 Properties, but there's a ton more. If you just Google search cannabis real estate, a bunch of those databases will pop up. They're usually associated with real estate agents or brokers, those websites that have the databases. Obviously, you don't need to use them. I would recommend always using somebody local if you're going to use an agent. So next, if you are your commercial real estate agent, you find a property that is located in the green zone, what they mostly call it these days. You're going to want to conduct due diligence on each separate property. We'll talk about this in detail, and my hope is today's webinar will empower you to do that yourself. However, if you do not have the time to do so, because it can be time consuming and it's a little nerve-wracking, sometimes you want a second person to check your work. You can have a consultant or an attorney help you out with that. I also recommend using the free unlimited coaching that is available to you. I'm available on Thursdays from 2:30 to 4:30, and you can sign up for half-hour sessions. We could probably knock a property out in that half hour and go through all the sensitive uses and things like that that come up for each of the properties. So due diligence, it's really important. The city will also, through the pre-application process, will take a look at that property and do the same due diligence that we're doing. They're going to make sure it's in the right zone. They're going to make sure there isn't any undue concentration in that area. And they'll look at all the sensitive uses. So they're going to double up on that work as well. We'll take a look at the pre-application review process. Again, that's something I hope you can walk away from this webinar knowing how to do. So after the pre-application process is hopefully when you would sign your commercial lease or get started on a purchase agreement to buy a property. And that's the whole point of having the pre-application is you don't need to have a lease for the city to verify whether a property is eligible or compliant. And so the goal is that for you, that you don't then have to put a deposit, non-refundable, especially before getting confirmation from the city that this property will work to operate a cannabis business. So after the city has confirmed that, then, or while that's happening, you can start to negotiate some of the commercial lease terms. First here on my list is just always want to remind people that the tenant on the lease, so that needs to be the same entity that holds the license. So my company is the permit company. That's going to operate a license, and it's also going to be the tenant on the lease, right? Another term that's really helpful is called a conditional lease term. So if you can, I always try to recommend my clients negotiate the lease to become fully binding once you have your annual license approved by the Department of Cannabis regulation or any step along the process of licensing. That's just one example. But that allows you to possibly get out of things like if you don't get approved in the first year for an annual license, you can back out of the lease. You might be bound to help them find another tenant, but you won't be bound to pay rent for the next 4 years that you're not actually using or attempting to get this building licensed. So conditional lease terms are really helpful. It really just depends on what the condition of the building is in too. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Another big one that I always tell my clients to do is called a graduated or a step up lease. This again depends on the conditions of the building. So, was somebody else already operating a cannabis delivery business out of there? And do they have their certificate of occupancy so that you would basically just be able to come in, sign a lease, and then apply for new licenses instead of having to go through the entire build out process from scratch? That like takes your timeline. If you have to build it out and get your licensing, your timeline is like maybe 2 years, right? But if it's already built out and somebody's already operated in there and there's a certificate of occupancy, you might be operating in 6 months, right? So a graduated or step up lease would basically take that time frame it takes for you to operate, and it would allow you to negotiate for a gradual increase in rent that's based on that timeline. So it might start out at $1 a month or $1 per square foot per month, and then it ends, at the end of the 2 year period, you're up to $2.50. Really just helps you to limit the cost up front before you start operating. And typically, a good landlord is interested in the success of your business and understands and believes in you, so they're okay with doing that. So I always find that as a good faith term too, like that kind of helps you gauge the the belief that your landlord has in your success and whether they're really just there to get the money. So it's a sign of a good landlord, I would say. And again, so with the purchase agreement, those are complicated contracts. We're not really going to go into that too much today. You really should have a licensed attorney and a licensed commercial real estate agent to complete this task. You have the low bono and pro bono access to that for legal assistance, and the commercial lease and purchase agreements are great contracts to bring to those meetings with the attorney and have them review. Obviously, I think having your real estate agent your real estate agent take it to a certain place and then bring it there, so you really limit the amount of time you're using them for, would be great. Okay, so that is a high level process for acquiring compliant real estate. Next, what I want to do is take a look at the pre-application review process. And in addition, we'll take a look at other things to help you with due diligence, but we'll start with pre-app. So the purpose of the pre-application review process, this is where the DCR determines compliance and eligibility of a proposed business location. It's fairly simple process. It's a standalone process, and it was created to allow applicants to verify whether a location is eligible for commercial cannabis licensure prior to signing a lease or purchase agreements, prior to paying any kind of annual license fees, right? So it's really helpful. Not all cities offer this, and I think it's really helpful. So anyhow, moving on. So important to know that obviously which licenses are offered by the city of LA, and which ones they're accepting applications for. So on this slide, you'll see the license types that are available in the city of LA and whether or not they're accepting applications. So for each of the cannabis licenses listed here, before you can submit your annual license application, you have to complete the pre-application. So it is ultimately with the city going to be step number one is in the licensing process is pre-application. You have to have the proposed business location approved. You can't get your annual license with the city or state prior to that. Those are tied to locations. During the pre-application review process, the DCR determines whether the proposed business location is eligible and compliant. And so you'll see here, we've got deliveries available right now. It's only available to social equity individual applicants, as well as we have non-volatile manufacturing, distribution, and testing labs Those are available to anybody. Cultivation, which includes nursery, is limited to social equity individual applicants, but they are not accepting applications at this time. Cultivation processor, those are being accepted right now. And then you have retail. They're not accepting applications for that right now, nor are they for volatile manufacturing. Okay, so the Los Angeles Municipal Code Section 104.4B is going to outline circumstances in which a business premise location is ineligible for licensure. So very important to know. The city is looking at people when it comes to the pre-application, reviewing a property. Who is the business or who is the property owner? So they're going to look at the property owner, but they're also going to look at the business premise location. They'll be looking at sensitive use, they'll be looking at setbacks, and they'll be looking at zoning. So section 105 is where you'll find the zoning and sensitive uses, whereas section 104.4B is going to tell you which business locations are ineligible. So many of you are probably wondering, at what point am I ready to submit pre-application? And so that's once you've conducted your due diligence and on a property and you've determined that it is ready to get reviewed by the city. We talked about earlier that you need to have your business entity established before you start looking for properties. It's going to show a property owner that you're serious. It also takes time, and you don't want to find a property and then say, oh, hey, but just can you wait while I get my business entity established? That same rule applies when it comes to the pre-application. You're going to need to have your business entity formed in order to apply for pre-application. So I won't go through this in detail, but really quickly, you're going to establish your business entity with the state of California, and you will need a federal employer identification number, an FEIN with the IRS, and a seller's permit with the CDTFA, the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration. So those are really, you get your articles of incorporation, your EIN, and your seller's permit to get your business entity established. And from there, you're going to have to get your licensing portal accounts established. So you'll start with yourself. You need one as a person. And then once you have your business entity established and you have the paperwork we just talked about, you're going to register for a business tax certificate with the city of LA. Instructions on how to do that is found on this slide. After you have your BTRC, you will register an account for your business on DCR's licensing portal. So you'll have two accounts, one's personal and one is your business. And like I said, in order to get that business account started, you would need to have your entity established with the state of California. And there's also a legal business entity record. How the getting started will show you how to establish that as well. But all those steps need to be taken before you can submit your pre-application. So I would say your entity formation and getting your proof of funds together step, I would include all of this as tasks that you need to complete because you want to be able to find a property that you like and get the landlord to cooperate with getting this pre-application review process submitted, and you don't really want to have lag time. So make sure you work on that as well. The pre-application forms and documents. So once you've got everything we just talked about completed, you're gonna want to know what's needed to be submitted. It's really only one form. It's number 3, the landowner attestation form. That is going to need to be signed and notarized by the landowner. We do have a workflow chart here that's going to show you exactly how to complete the process or what the steps are with the pre-application. I won't take too much time reviewing that today. You can take a look at that on your own time. But it's really easy. You're just going to submit the landowner attestation form through the DCR portal. And you'll have, this is the form right here. It's linked out. This form is, it's really the landlord has to notarize it, and the landlord is attesting to the fact that the location eligibility stuff that we're going to talk about is correct. So we'll talk about that in a second, but it's really your landlord is attesting to you being able to use the property for the specific license type. And it's also the landlord attesting that there hasn't been illegal activity at the site, and so forth. So they'll want to read that, I'm sure, beforehand. The other thing that's really important about the landowner attestation form is that if the landowner is a sole proprietor, it's just one individual, great. They can sign that form and notarize it, and you're good to go. But if the landowner is an LLC or a corporation and there are many owners, any owner that has a 20% or more interest in the business will also have to sign this. So important to bring up when you're talking to the landlord in the initial stages that they know, okay, we know we're talking to you today, but any of your business partners that own more than 20% are also going to have to sign this form. All right, so where do you submit the pre-application? So like we said, there's really just one form that's required to be uploaded for the pre-application process. So once you have that form ready to go, you're going to be logging into the portal to Excella, and you will be providing the city with just the address and basic business information, as well as the form to submit. And the city is going to then take that information and determine whether the location is eligible and in compliance. You've got to submit the following required pre-application information and forms. Like we said, you'll need to propose the license type. You'll need to provide the business premise location, the address specifically, and the landowner form. Where to submit, like we said, you want to submit that information in that one form on Excella through your business account. The pre-application review is $597. Once the pre-application is submitted in the DCR portal, that'll create a record number on your account. It'll generate an invoice, and that invoice needs to be paid within 30 days. Failure to make that payment on time will result in the abandonment of the pre-application record. And then, if the business premise location is eligible and compliant, the record status will be updated in the DCR's licensing portal to eligible for processing, and the applicant will receive a status update via email. Once the status of your pre-application review record is eligible for processing, the applicant has completed the pre-application review process, and they may submit an annual license application with DCR. And it's important to know that from the time that you achieve the eligible for processing status on that specific property, you have 1 year to submit the annual license application. So that starts from the time you receive the eligible for processing. The city's confirmed the location is eligible and compliant. You have 1 year to get your annual license application submitted. Okay, so the big component, the pre-application review process, it's pretty simple. But before you're ready to submit pre-application, you really want to know how to determine a compliant location and whether it's eligible. So, like I've said, there are two sections in the code, two large sections in code that's going to show you where you can locate your business. So again, it's really determined whether or not a proposed business location is compliant or eligible based on four considerations. The first one is zoning restrictions under Section 5. The second is eligibility requirements under Section 104.4. And third is distancing from sensitive uses under section 105. And the fourth is distancing from commercial cannabis businesses with on-site retail sales. And that's also in section 105. So let's take a look at zoning restrictions. Commercial cannabis can only occur within certain zones of the city. Section 105.02 outlines zoning restrictions by license type. Just going to look today at cultivation and retail, but basically what you'll see in the code is you'll have retailer commercial cannabis activity section, and it's going to show you all of the eligible zones. So you see here, there's quite a few for retail. Next, we'll look at indoor commercial cannabis cultivation activity. Here are the eligible zones for cultivation. So it's important that you know these zones based on which license type you're going to apply for, and they're different for every single one. So you have retail, cultivation, distribution, manufacturing, and testing. They all have different zones that you can locate in. And that's the first step when you have an address, is confirming that the zoning is right and that it's in the green zone. Typically, your real estate agent will know how to do this or know what those zones are, but you can provide them with a list just to be extra thorough. But you're also going to want to know the zone for that's appropriate for the license type that you're trying to operate. And I'll show you how you can confirm that a little bit further down in this webinar. The next section that's really important to know, and you need to bring up to your landlord, is ineligible locations. So commercial cannabis activity cannot occur on properties owned by certain individuals, and it cannot locate on properties that have received certain code violations. And so those are going to be outlined in Los Angeles Municipal Code Section 104.4B. This will detail what we're talking about, and I'm going to review that real quick. So first and foremost, the business premise cannot be located in a community plan area that has reached undue concentration. Again, I'll show you where you can find this information. It's publicly available, but when you go and you find a property, step number one, is it in the right zone? Step number two, is it in a community plan area that's reached undue concentration? If it has, or if it is located in a community plan area that has reached undue concentration, it doesn't mean you can't locate it, your business there, but it's an extra process that you have to go through, which is called public convenience or necessity. And I wouldn't necessarily recommend it unless it's like the best property you're seeing and you really are attached to it. It would be something I would look into, but I would talk to an attorney or somebody about that process and what it looks like before you move forward. Second would be the business premise is owned by a person who holds office in any agency of the state of California or any of its political subdivisions, including the city, right? So that's pretty straightforward. You can't have a state or city employee own this property that you're trying to locate your cannabis business in. So that's something obviously you want to verify from the property owner before you move forward. The other ones are basically if you've had an illegal cannabis operation at the location and it has been less than 5 years since they've been in violation, then that property is ineligible for licensing. After the 5 years, it'll be considered, but it's really important to know that you can't have had illegal cannabis operation at that site within the last 5 years. And the other one would be that the business premise was the site of a disconnection of utilities for a period of 5 years from when you're getting licensed. So those things you want to bring up to the landlord ahead of time. These are things that are outlined, all of the requirements, those are outlined in the landowner attestation form. So not only should you bring this up and confirm, but they're also signing and notarizing a form that says they're aware of what disqualifies a business location for cannabis operations, and that this site does not violate any of those. So important to bring that up. Find that section in the code, plop it into an email, and send it over to somebody once you're interested in the property, so they're aware of all of that. Sensitive use distancing is the next component. So commercial cannabis activity cannot occur at a business premise location unless it meets certain sensitive use distancing requirements for specific license types. So you'll find this in the Municipal Code Section 105. So distancing. So this is stuff that's all available publicly to you and would be part of the due diligence process. Um, we have essentially a few resources we'll take a look at, not quite yet, but that are going to help you determine what are the sensitive uses, where are they located in relation to the property that you are looking to occupy. And then there's some tools that will allow you to measure the distance of those sensitive uses. And we're going to take a close look at one property in particular to just see how to do that. But first off, when it comes to distancing from sensitive uses, it's different per license type. The most rigorous being the retail storefront. So for retail storefront, you need a 700-foot radius from schools, public parks, public libraries, alcohol or drug abuse recovery or treatment facilities, daycare centers, proposed supportive or permanent supportive housing, as well as any other licensed storefront with on-site retail sales. So retail specifically is 700 square feet. For a non-storefront retailer, also known as delivery, as well as distributor, cultivator, non-volatile manufacturing or testing labs, the only sensitive use that you're going to be measuring for and looking for is a 600-foot radius from a school. And last here is a volatile manufacturer. So they are required to be 600-foot radius from a school, but also 200 feet from residentially zoned property. So key there is 200 feet from a residentially zoned property, not from a residential like zoned area, right? So we can talk about that, how to measure the sensitive uses in a little bit, but before you measure any of these sensitive uses, it's important to know where you're measuring from. Are you measuring from the corner of a building to the corner of another building, or are you measuring from the property edges to the other property edges, right? And they're different based on what you're looking at. So for retail commercial cannabis businesses, like we said, they're 700-foot radius, right? And so that's with a retailer that has on-site sales or a micro business that has on-site sales. It must be 700 feet. And what you're going to do is you're going to measure the business premise from, I believe, let's see. So it's going to be a horizontal distance measured in a straight line without regard to any structures in between. And it's going to be closest exterior wall of each business. So again, for retail to retail, cannabis retail to cannabis retail, it's going to be from the exterior wall of each business, the closest exterior walls, and it'll be a diagonal line. The distance let's see, the distance between commercial cannabis activity business and any sensitive use that has exclusive use of the parcel which it's located on. So if it's a school and all that's on that property is a school, then you're going to do the horizontal distance measured in a straight line, and that's going to be the closest exterior wall of a commercial cannabis business to the closest parcel boundary of the sensitive use. And then if it's a commercial cannabis activity to a sensitive use that does not have exclusive use, so it's a shopping center or something, and it has a daycare in the shopping center, then you're going to do from the wall, the closest wall to the closest wall, from the cannabis business to the wall to the closest wall of the daycare center versus the entire property. So it gives you a little bit more room to work with. So those are important. Those are outlined in section 105, how to measure the distances. We didn't review them all, but they are different based on which businesses you're measuring. So be sure to review that as well. Again, we can help you out in the coaching sessions to understand where you're measuring from, or we can help you measure whatever works for you. So I do want to quickly take a look at the mapping tools and data available to you. So first, it's the DCR licensing map and data. So this is on DCR's website. And the second one is the ZEMA's map. And this is property information and zoning for measuring. You can use this one for measuring as well. I don't have this listed here, but Google Maps is also a good place to look. I honestly, if when I'm measuring, I make sure I measure like 2 to 3 times. I'll measure on the ZEMA's map and I'll measure on the Google map. Really just try to be thorough. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to share the screen so I can show you the different tools to use. So first up, let's see. So first I'm going to show you the city's website. And so if you go to the DCR main page and you go to licensing and compliance, over on the left-hand side, you'll see licensing map. So if you click on licensing map, 2 things show up here. One, you can check whether the community plan area has reached undue concentration. And the 2 license types that you need to know about as far as undue concentration is retail storefront and cultivation. So there are 2 tabs here. I will show you where to find the community plan area info, but once you have that, you can come here and you can see, okay, retail storefront or cultivation. It's going to tell you by community plan area, has it hit capacity, how many are allowed, all the information you need to know is whether or not you can locate your business there. So this is, again, community plan information. The next one that you can look at, I don't find it as helpful as the zoning map, but basically what you would do is you would find, you can't search the address on here. You just kind of have to zoom into the address that you're looking at. And you can find out, this is a good place to maybe make a spreadsheet list of what's located. So let's say this purple dot is your property. You'll see here, you have a daycare center right here. So you can type down the name, you can type down the address, and then make sure that you look at it and measure it in a map I'll show you shortly. Again, here you are, you have another daycare center. So this is going to show you some of the sensitive uses. I don't depend on it to show me all of them. Again, I'll use a mix of this map, but then I'll also go look on Google and just drill down and search in the area to see if there's any other schools or whatever sensitive uses I need to be aware of based on the business type. But this is available to you. You can find most of the sensitive uses here, make a list. And then what I would recommend doing is once you've checked the community plan areas, you've looked at this map, seen if the city has outlined any sensitive uses, you'll go over to the zoning map. And here you will search based on an address. So you have a link in this webinar presentation to this map in particular. You can search by address or you can search by assessor's parcel number, whichever one you have available. But real quickly, I'm going to take a look at City Hall. So it's 200 North Spring Street. I'm not going to put the north in there because you don't want to put the prefix in there, but you'll hit go. And here, again, 200 North Spring Street is City Hall, and it is located here in blue. Usually it zooms in, but you'll notice it is highlighted in blue. And here you'll be able to find information on the left-hand side that shows you the community plan area. So if you come over here on zoning and planning information, the community plan area is right here. So it's downtown. Then you can check out the list that we just looked at, right? So is downtown taking applications? Look there, right? So you've got your community plan area. Then you also have your zoning information here too. So again, second most important thing to look at is zoning information and confirm that based on the municipal code, if you're doing cultivation or delivery, that this property or parcel is located in the correct zone. And after that, you have the ability through the map that we just looked at here on DCR's website to see some of the sensitive uses. But like I said, I also will go over to Google Maps. I'll go search to my address, and then once my map is zoomed in on the address, if you just search schools, daycare centers, etc., those will pop up, and I just make a spreadsheet that lists out all those addresses, and then you have to come back over here, and you're going to need to use the measuring tool over here to measure the distance between a park or a school. So it's pretty simple. Like if it's a parcel to parcel, you're going to go parcel line to parcel line. And you'll see here, it tells you how many feet, how far apart the two parcels are. Or again, if it's like the building to the building wall to the building wall, again, you would just use this measuring tool and it'll help tell you the distance. So you'll want to do that for each of the sensitive uses that have been outlined in the municipal code for your property. So just wanted to give you a quick look at where you find community plan information, where you find the zoning information, and how to measure the sensitive uses. It really just takes some use of the platforms to get the hang of it, but I trust you can do it. I'm also available, as well as several other coaches, for you to bring an address onto the coaching session. We can jump on all of these databases together, and we can go through the process. Eventually, you'll probably become a pro and won't need us to do it for you, but I wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that. So that was the mapping tools available to you. And then let's see. I'm going to bring us back to the presentation here. One sec. Sorry, everybody. All right. Okay, so we've got the links to the two mapping tools and the data available. Next, really quick, some compliance tips. Check your work in terms of measuring. I would check it 2 to 3 times. Do not sign a lease or a purchase agreement before conducting due diligence. And if you can, hold off on signing anything until after the pre-application process. That might not be possible. They may want you to sign a letter of intent and just get the negotiation process started while your pre-application is being reviewed. But don't put down any outrageous deposits. Especially like with appropriate proof of funding and credit, they should trust you. You should really never have to put more than first and last month's rent down for a lease, but I just would not put that down until after the pre-application process. If they do require some kind of deposit, I would make sure you have in writing that it's refundable based on the pre-application being approved. We talked about lease terms. Definitely want to get the conditional lease. And one thing that we didn't talk about is the use of premise in the lease. You really want to make sure that there's a clause in there that says you are allowed to use the property for cannabis distribution, cannabis delivery, whatever the license is that you're applying for. You want to make sure that it is called out in the lease in a specific clause called use of premise. And because otherwise you'll have some trouble getting approval by the city or the state. They want to see that the specific use is called out, right? So if you plan on doing distribution and delivery, make sure distribution and delivery are in there. Make sure medical and adult use are in there as well, if just to be thorough. And make sure you try to include your future plans if you want to expand. Just get it in the lease now so you don't have to go back and ask your landlord to do an amendment and possibly, open up the potential of increasing rent or things like that. So just think ahead of that. So remember, licenses are not transferable. There are a lot of opportunities to get a lease or purchase a building that may have an existing license or an existing building. And that would be its own webinar. That's acquiring a business. It can be done, but make sure that you involve your attorney or consultant before this process, and so that you understand like how does it work to buy a business and operate under an existing license. So really important to know. The other thing I would be aware of is a lot of landlords or even real estate agents will say, oh, it's turnkey, it's turnkey. Really, most things are not turnkey right now. You could find a spot that was previously operated as a delivery company, and you're going to come in and it's already got a certificate of occupancy. Well, any like any changes to the building, any tenant improvements, you're going to have to go through a building permit process. So hopefully you don't need to make any improvements to the building because you can't operate it until those improvements are approved by the building department and inspected, right? So turnkey means that you're not going to make any changes to the interior or the exterior of the building. And in addition, turnkey, like you still have to go get your annual licenses with the city and the state. Those take time. So turnkey, it's really hard to find something that you can step your foot into today once you sign the lease and start operating. So know what that means or doesn't mean for your situation. And then also green zone. A lot of times people just think if it's in the green zone, it's good to go. But we've talked today about the extensive due diligence that you need to do to ensure that that property is actually okay to operate in. So just really quick, the resources we've talked about are available. Your pro bono legal assistance you have available, like use it. This is a great one to do, use the services for. We also have the one-on-one coaching. There are tons of other coaches out there. So go in and sign up. You have unlimited amount of time that you can work with them as the coaching is available. They're 30-minute sessions. And most of the time you can sign up, day of. We're available for a certain time slot and we're there, whether people are signed up or not. So know that that is available to you. Some other resources. And I won't go over the key takeaways. We've talked about this enough because I know we're limited on time here, and I want to make sure there's a couple of questions that we can answer. But this just reviews kind of the pre-application process, the suggested order of operations, and this is all of the resources that were linked out in the webinar, including the code sections. I know it was a lot to go over in a webinar. The code stuff can be clunky. So go to these links and review it yourself. And yeah, I'll open it up to question and answer. And I think Frank's going to help out with that.
Great. Thank you, Courtney. Yeah, let's move to a couple questions. We're limited on time, but let's just take a few extra minutes to respond to a couple of these. And I want to thank the DCR team for responding to some great questions along the way. I got a couple of questions that we'll use as we wrap up. The first one, which I think is really important and potentially critical. What can I do to protect myself and my business from spending money purchasing or leasing a property prior to the pre-application review?
That's a great question. Thanks, Frank. So if you're purchasing, wait for the pre-application to be approved prior to signing any purchase agreements. You usually have a refundable and a non-refundable period with your purchase agreements. So if you do need to sign a purchase agreement, I think that making sure that you are clear on the time frame for when your deposit goes non-refundable and that pre-application fits within it, right? Because you don't want to fail to have your pre-application approved before your deposit is then taken by the landowner. So that I think is really important, knowing the deposit timeframes, and how long it takes for it to go non-refundable. And if you're leasing, something that you could do is sign a letter of intent, versus signing a lease. So get a letter of intent out there to the landlord. And that would include just like basic terms, like what you want to pay in for your lease terms and how long the term would be. But it would outline basic terms, and it would also require the landowner attestation form to be signed. So a letter of intent is a good step before signing a lease. I would never offer any kind of deposit and just wait for a landowner to say, "Hey, I really want this deposit to secure your place in line." Um, at that point, if they're really saying something like that, trust your gut.
Mhm.
Not all landlords are great people, so make sure if you do end up putting it down that you put a term in your letter of intent that says it's refundable until the pre-application is approved.
Yeah, well, great response and great advice. Another one that was submitted, our application date is set to be abandoned soon. Will the date we submit the pre-application review count towards abandonment exemption or when the invoice is paid?
So the 1 year period starts from the date that the DCR changes the record status for your pre-application to eligible for processing. So once the status changes to eligible for processing, you have 1 year to submit
Hmm.
your annual license application.
Okay, great. And then final question, can I submit one pre-application for multiple licenses?
So, yes, if you're planning to get a lease and you've got a premise that's going to have delivery and distribution, when you go to submit your pre-application review, you want to make sure you select all the license types that you want located at that address. And so then when the city goes to review the location, they're going to check for zoning and sensitive uses for that specific license type and approve you for each one. So if you clicked delivery and distro, they'll say, yes, this is good for delivery and distro or only
Hmm.
delivery, right? So you can put multiple licenses under one pre-application. However, you can't do multiple addresses. So the pre-application is tied to a specific address. So you'll have to submit a separate pre-application for each address you're interested in verifying.
Yeah. Great, Courtney. Well, as always, we're out of time. So
Yes,
great presentation, a lot of information, and thank you again for covering in such thorough detail.
you're
I'd
welcome.
like to thank our presenter, Courtney Lang, and thank you all for attending this informative webinar offered by the City of Los Angeles Department of Cannabis Regulation. This webinar recording will be found on DCR's Learning Management System. If you have any questions on accessing your account, please email dcr.sep@lacity.org. Thank you again for joining us and have a wonderful day. Thank you.